welcome to Techie Teachers. My name is Nicole Gernon, and today we're going to do something a little bit different. Initially, the plan for Techie Teachers was to focus on how we can incorporate more technology in our instruction to enhance what we're already doing in the classroom. But upon the launch of the website, we've had a lot of requests from teachers asking us to also include different strategies or ideas for things that you can do in your classroom that don't necessarily apply to the use of technology. So something I've heard a lot from teachers is asking questions about how they can improve their writing conferencing. And so that's something that we're going to talk about today. I thought a lot about this and thinking that there may be several videos to go along with writing conferencing, but today we're going to focus on how to develop a structure or a model for your conference time, and then from there you can start developing what your lessons might actually look like.
Let's say we have writing 5 days a week, and I have anywhere from 20 to 30 minutes each day that I'm dedicating to conferencing. If I use these times to create a schedule, it will help me ensure that I'm meeting with every student every week. I can see how many students I need to meet with each day, and it gives my students the opportunity to be able to know when I'm going to visit with them. That way, if they have any questions that they want to bring to me when I'm going to see them on that particular day, they know that they're going to get that one-on-one time where we can discuss their writing.
Now that we've looked at a one-on-one conferencing schedule, let's talk a little bit about one-on-one conferences. So we want to develop one-on-one conference time with all of our students because that's going to give us that individualized attention that all of our students are going to need. We know that with writing instruction, sometimes even more than other subject areas, our students are so different. So while we have some students that are working on basic sentence structure, we have other students who are writing, trilogies. And so we need to find a way that we can meet the needs of all of those students. So our one-on-one conference times are really important. That's where I've already previewed the writing of my students. I already have an idea of what I want to work on with those students. And when they come back to me, we're going to sit down. I might give them an opportunity at the beginning to tell me what they're doing or ask me any questions if they need my help with something, but I already have an idea of a skill and an activity that we're going to do to address that skill before they ever come. So we talk about that, I give them something to do to move on, I take my notes, they go back to their seat, and then I work with my next student. That's really important, again, to address those individualized needs. Although when we're looking at our schedule, as I mentioned before, as you get to know your students, you may find that you have some students that seeing them once a week isn't going to be enough. And so maybe you want one-on-one conference time more often. But then time becomes an issue, so how can we address that? So something we can look at other than one-on-one conference time is something that we call roving conferences. So a roving conference is something where you walk around the room and you just touch base with a student really quickly. I'm looking over their shoulder, I'm watching their writing, I preview my notes from their previous one-on-one conference, and I know to look for, maybe we were working on show not tell. When I'm looking over and watching them write, I'm seeing, are they addressing that show not tell skill that we had talked about in our previous one-on-one conference? And maybe I'm just making a quick note in my notebook and mentioning something to them, and then I'm moving along. So it's really quick. This is really appropriate for your class if you're in a situation where sometimes when we're starting a new writing piece, we feel like we don't have a lot to really conference on. So maybe I might do a roving conference with my whole class just to take some quick notes on where they are. And so then when I go into my one-on-one conferences the next day when they have a little more writing to do, I have an idea of some things I picked up already. So that's one way that you can use roving conferences for your whole class. Another thing that you can do is if you have those struggling students and you know that you're not going to be able to see them every day, but you feel like they sort of need your attention every day, you can do a quick roving conference with them, 1 minute, 2 minutes, before you start your conferences with other students.
Another way that I really like to use roving conferences is to think about my higher level students. I may have a group of students that struggle that may need to see me 2 or 3 times a week. And the way that I've addressed the time issue with that is thinking about how I can better structure my time with my higher level students. I still want to make sure that the time with them is not sacrificed and everything that they need from me they're still getting, but they may not necessarily need a one-on-one conference every week. So what I can do is I can provide them with that one-on-one conference 1 week, and on the other week I can do a roving conference. And that roving conference is going to save me time that I can then apply to my students who struggle and seeing them more often. What I really like about this is that it allows me to meet the needs of all of my students. I'm still making sure that my higher level students are moving forward as a writer, but I'm also ensuring that I'm finding time to see the students who need to see me more often and for a longer period of time. I think frequency is really important, particularly when we're looking at those struggling students, because we want them to be open to the feedback that we're giving them. They'll be more receptive if we can give them feedback throughout their writing, rather than not seeing them for a week or two and waiting until they get done with an entire story and then expecting them to go back to the beginning and make changes. So they'll be more willing and more receptive if we can provide feedback on a regular and consistent basis.
So when we're thinking about time management, a roving conference is a really good option. You can use it in a lot of different ways, but it helps you to better balance meeting the needs of all of your students. Another thing that you can do is you can try to group students based on skill. So again, I use this a lot with my students who struggle because I want to see them as often as I possibly can. And a lot of times those students need some of the same skills. So what I might do is I might have a student who struggles and I might see them one-on-one. Then I might also do a roving conference with them. And then I also may have a mini lesson that I'm doing with a group of 4 or 5 students who struggle, and I'm meeting with them all at once. So then I feel like this particular student who may really need my attention, instead of seeing them once a week, I've seen them 3 times a week. So that's something to also consider.
Grouping students based on skill is not something that replaces a one-on-one conference, but it really is a great option when you're trying to find ways to see students more than once. If I'm going to group students based on a particular skill, that is not the only time I'm going to see them that week, but it gives me that opportunity to take the amount of time that I might spend on a one-on-one conference, and I'm able to see 4 students or 5 students all at one time. Essentially, when you're thinking about, particularly again, our students who struggle, a lot of them have the same skills that they need. And so if we need to work on a particular skill, we can plan a mini lesson, have a specific activity that we're all working on, and we can work on that skill together all at one time. And then my one-on-one conference time can be used to work on specific needs for that specific student.
Now that we've talked about the different types of conferences that you can have throughout your week, again I want to reiterate that our intention is always to try to focus on one-on-one conferencing. We want our instruction and our mini lessons to be as individualized as we possibly can. But think about roving conferences and group conferences as a way to try to address that need for time. So of course in a perfect week, if we can have one-on-one conferences with every student as many times as they need us, that would be great, but we know that that's not something that's feasible. So trying to think across with all students and prioritizing them as far as what they need from us and making sure that we're addressing their needs, but what they need from us might not be the same.
Here is an example of what a schedule might look like once you start incorporating the 3 different types of conferences that we've discussed. You'll notice here that we have roving conferences, group conferences, and then one-on-one conferences that are happening throughout the entire week. What that allows me to do is to be able to see certain students multiple times. In this case, you'll notice that Jessica is highlighted 3 different times. And she's not the only one. Jessica, Bella, Jack, Zach, McKenna, Nick, Trent, Chloe, all of those students are students that appear on my list more than once. What I also want you to notice is that if you look at the first student on Monday, Marley, she receives a roving conference. She's one of 4 students who are only receiving a roving conference this week, which means that those certain students will also be receiving a one-on-one conference in the following week. So when I mentioned earlier that you could possibly choose those higher level students to be students that receive a roving conference one week and a one-on-one conference on the other week, and then using that time to make time for some of your other students, that's an example of what I'm talking about. So Marley would be someone that I would make sure I have a one-on-one conference with on the next week, which means that this schedule is not going to be my schedule for the year because the skill groups that I have that you noticed are going to change. They're not the same. And the next week, if I'm working on a different skill, I might have different students that need to be a part of that group. So your conference schedule is forever changing, but what's most important is that it best meets the needs of your particular class. And so by thinking about how you want to schedule your time and who you want to see, you really get the most out of the limited time that you have to work with those students. So consider creating a conference schedule for your classroom and utilizing the 3 different types of conferences, whether you're seeing students through a roving conference, a group conference, a one-on-one conference, or all three, you know that you're meeting the needs of each individual student in your classroom. And we know that time goes by so fast and we have so many things to cover that keeping a schedule not only keeps us on track, it also keeps our students on track. It helps us feel confident and comfortable in knowing that we're addressing everyone's needs. And I think that you'll find that your conference time becomes even more effective than it already is. So think about your schedule. Talk to your writing committee reps, talk to other teachers, figure out what schedule is working for them, bounce ideas off of each other, but ultimately come up with a plan that best meets the needs of your students in your classroom.